The one with the engagement picture is a pretty good episode of Friends. This is the 5th episode of the 7th season. It's directed by Gary Halvorson, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I talk about various aspects of the episode and share some thoughts. And there are 3 main parts to the narrative, and I'll start by talking about the story with Monica and Chandler. I have the least amount of notes on this one, even though I think it might actually be my favourite part. And then I'll talk about Rachel and Tag, and then Phoebe and Ross, which is quite an interesting story. So, as the title suggests, Monica and Chandler are getting an engagement picture. This is because Judy wants to put the engagement announcement in the local newspaper. And Monica can't really find any pictures of her and Chandler that are suitable. Mostly because Chandler makes a weird face when he smiles. And I have to say, I'm with Chandler on this one for a very, very long time. I couldn't smile on command. I mean, I could, but it looked weird. So if you look at, I'm not going to share them, but if you look at my school photos, my smile looks so crooked. I actually had to practice smiling for a long time. So I'm with Chandler on this one. And we have various visits to the photographer. And they're trying various things with Chandler to help him smile. And he smiles naturally. But as soon as he looks at the camera, or as soon as the camera is on him, he smiles a little bit more bizarrely. And Joey gives him some advice, and ultimately, it just seems like nothing is working. And at the end of the episode, Monica comes into Central Park all excited. She's got the newspaper with the announcement, and we get to see the photo. And it's of Monica and Joey, but with Chandler's name, of course. And I guess whatever works for them. I like the fact Chandler wasn't that bothered by it. I think he was just happy that there wasn't a picture of him looking awkward in the paper. Also, this would not work today. I mean, I feel like most people are not putting engagement announcements in newspapers today anyway. But I feel like having somebody else in the place of your partner wouldn't work today because you'd be called out very, very quickly. But I enjoyed it. I really liked Chandler in this episode. Then we have Rachel and Tag. As Chandler points out, Rachel can't date Tag. She hired him. It wouldn't be right. And she knows. She knows this. And then Melissa in her office wants to ask Tag out, and Rachel's not happy about this. So when Joey comes in to borrow a shirt because he ruined his and he has an audition, Rachel asks him to take Tag out. And she says this is because he's new to town, he doesn't have any guy friends, but it's very clear that Rachel just wants Tag to have a distraction that isn't another woman. And Joey agrees, and we find out that Tag had a great time. They went to a Knicks game, and then they went to a bar where there were a lot of women. And, well, if that wasn't bad enough, somebody walked past him and he said, "How you doing?" Very Joey-fied. And needless to say, Rachel's not happy because this had the exact opposite effect of what she'd hoped for. And we have this really great conversation. She goes over to Joey's apartment and Chandler's there, and just Chandler was invisible the entire time, and I loved his reaction to this. And obviously Rachel's telling Joey that this wasn't acceptable, and just Chandler's response and his role in this, I think, was even funnier than whatever was happening between Rachel and Joey. Chandler really shone in this episode, as he often does, of course. And Rachel ends up speaking with Tag again, and for a split second, it seems like, and not for the first time, it seems like Tag is going to ask Rachel out on a date. But of course, he doesn't. He tells her he's getting back with his ex. So none of that went according to Rachel's plan. And I quite like it. I think the part of the narrative works well. I think Tag is a very likeable character. And in general, I'd say it's a decent part of the episode. And then we come to Phoebe and Ross. And their part of the narrative starts in Central Park when Hums While He Pees, also known as Kyle, asks Phoebe out on a date. He's played by David Sutcliffe, and it seems to be going well. But then when they're back in Central Park, Kyle happens to see his ex, Whitney, outside, and he's worried that she's going to come in and cause problems, and Phoebe has a solution. She asks Ross to go and distract Whitney, and he doesn't take that much persuasion once Phoebe gives him tickets to a show, and he goes and it seems like the problem's solved. And then the next thing we see is Phoebe going over to Ross's, and Whitney's also coming over. Not only did Ross distract Whitney temporarily, but they actually hit it off, and it seems like they're going to start dating. And her comment about the door not being soundproof, I rather enjoyed. And we have just some great arguments between Phoebe and Ross, because she says Whitney's crazy, because obviously that's everything Whitney's ex Kyle has told Phoebe. But of course, Whitney has told Ross things about Kyle. I'm not entirely sure why they're both spending so much time talking about their current date's exes, but certainly we have this beautiful argument between Ross and Phoebe in Central Park, and it was really brilliant. But then Phoebe brought up New Year's Eve 1997, and Ross's response was just fantastic, and it was so funny. They're basically arguing on behalf of Kyle and Whitney, and it was just beautifully executed. Very, very well done. And I like the fact that they wrapped this up as well in this episode. They could have dragged it out. We could have had Phoebe dating Kyle for longer, Ross dating Whitney for longer. But I like that they kind of wrapped it up in one, because towards the end of the episode, Kyle and Whitney decide to get back together. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, if they're willing to be bitter about each other to their latest dates. It doesn't seem like a recipe for a good relationship. But nevertheless, they're back together, and I like the fact that we were able to conclude this in this episode. It is a really good episode. Personal highlights would be Chandler, in general. The faces he makes, the fact that he was feeling invisible. I don't like the fact he was feeling invisible, but just the way he responded when Rachel was talking with Joey, I really thoroughly enjoyed. And, of course, Phoebe and Ross arguing in Central Park as well. So it's a decent episode. I have no complaints. I think the one with the engagement picture works really well, and I'm sure it's an episode that I will always really thoroughly enjoy.